Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Brass Band Conductors Association virtual networking event. Tonight we're talking about Repertoire Choice. It's going to be a very informal event, so rather than a presentation with questions and discussion at the end, Mareika and Mareika, our guests, are going to talk about a few topics, and you're welcome to chip in, ask questions, and we'll have a good discussion between us. So the topic of repertoire choice, we're looking at, is there a formula? Is there some magic inspiration, or is it just a minefield? And maybe that's why you're here, or you're here to get some ideas. We expect this session to finish no later than 8:30. Even if we're mid-discussion, it's going to finish at 8:30. We might have finished before then, but that's the cut-off point. So I'm going to start with some introductions. You probably know both of our guests very well. So we've got Michael Fowles, regarded as one of the leading conductors of his generation, hailing from the rich musical tradition of North Staffordshire. Is an honours and postgraduate of the Royal Northern College of Music, and he's been musical director of Fowles since 2009. Having worked with many of the country's leading bands, Michael has a reputation for entertaining concert programming and high standards in competition. He's well known for having transferable skills, having won championship section contests with 11 different bands, either in regular working relationships or on a freelance basis, and is much in demand in the UK and abroad. And then we have our other guest, Mareika Gray. She's musical director of the Eccles Brass Band, Borough Brass Band, based in the northwest of England, and until recently was artistic director and professional musical director of the Rugby Co-op Band. Throughout her career, Mareika continues to feature in prizes at many competitions. She's established herself among the leading brass band conductors with her inspiring concert programmes and unique interpretations of major brass band works. She continues to appear at major concert halls, including Symphony Hall, Birmingham, Royal Albert Hall, and the Grieg Hall in Bergen. Looking forward to, in Mareika's diary, is always busy engaging with new bands all over Europe and beyond. So welcome to our guests. I'm going to stop sharing this picture, and I'm going to hand over to Mareika and Michael to set us off on the topic of repertoire choice. Thanks.
Do you want me to go first, Michael?
Why not?
All right. Well, in preparation for this evening, Michael and I had a discussion about a good number of things, but the two words that we came up with that will sum up what we're going to talk about all night is entertain and educate. And there is what the differences are there, the need for putting on certain pieces of music. Are you there to is educating an audience exactly the same as entertaining, and how can you make the two link up with each other? Mike?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, this, because to a large extent the expected audience is going to play a big part in this. I think if we're in a situation, for example, where we are giving a summer proms type concert, then obviously the repertoire we choose, we can pretty much gauge and expect what type of audience we're going to have. And so this question of entertain or educate, I think, I don't see as two separate things, actually, Mareika. I think the two can coexist very, very happily. And actually, is it a question of, are we educating an audience, or are we just introducing them to repertoire they may not be familiar with? And I think a lot of this comes down to packaging. I mean, and I know, for example, it's really interesting actually that Alan's on here tonight, because I know you've recently done a concert of really serious it was a great program, really serious repertoire. And just talking to one of the other delegates a moment ago, the recent Elgar International Brass Band Festival, there's clearly an audience for serious brass band music. That it's clear there's clearly an audience there, and not just for the RNCM event at the end of January every year, which I think for all of us is really refreshing. But in terms of regular concerts, for want of a better description, I think this question of are we trying to entertain or are we trying to educate, I kept coming round this as to actually, is that a question, or is it just introducing people to repertoire they may not be familiar with? And then I think it comes down, for Mareika, it comes down to packaging, doesn't it? If we're going to present something new, then if it's sandwiched within a programme of repertoire they may be familiar with, then they may be more inclined to accept the new material. I think if we give an audience new material straight away without anything for them to hang the hat on, as it were, unless it's specifically advertised in that manner so that people know what they're coming to, that could lead us to other problems with an audience maybe not appreciating the music that we present as much as they might.
Yeah, I think from my own personal example, as I do regular concerts with Eccles in the town hall, it's essentially the same audience, and only a couple of times have I thrown a test piece in. And it's there are a lot of the older generation there, and they want their toe tapping, happy clappy music. That's what they're expecting. But recently, before the Spring Festival, I chose to do Journey to the Centre of the Earth, which would have been such a dramatic difference. But I described each part and bits to listen out for. And, especially with the Whispering Gallery, they all knew that they were expecting this and they were expecting that. And it got the biggest cheer of the night. And that, in a way, yes, you're presenting them new music, and that is, in a way, it's an education, because they're learning to appreciate things outside of the brass band in the park repertoire, the typical brass band in the park repertoire.
But I think what's interesting with the way you've described it and the way you set it up, that was the key to them not feeling like they were being educated.
Yes,
because obviously Centre of the Earth has got such a clear story. Obviously inspired from literature. It's that pieces like that. I think the worst thing we can ever do is introduce. And now we're going to play next week's test piece.
Yeah,
that's it. But if we set it up the right way, and as you said, give them things to hang the hat on through the performance, and listen out for this. When this happens, it's this part of the story. It doesn't surprise me that it got a great reaction.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I've been to concerts and adjudicated entertainment contests where the conductor will do just that. And now we are going to play. And I know people make fun of that, but people are still doing it. They're still throwing pieces of music out to an audience, and it's almost like a barrage rather than a open-armed response. They feel like they're being battered with stuff. So has anyone got anything to say, add, contribute to this?
I think we both feel quite strongly about this, that we want to tonight, as much as anything, from things we say to be triggers for a sharing of ideas. So there's the first tumbleweed of the night.
Okay. So
you might have noticed that Rita has come up with this new word called edutainment, a mixture of education and entertainment. So there you go, that's the answer. You look like you're going to say something.
Was I? Oh, right. No, it's interesting to start off with, as you talked about there for the pair of you. One of the questions I'm going to ask you, have you got a good idea of what your audiences are? I think to start off with, I know, Mike, through your experience, and you, Mareika, as you said, you've got local audiences, whatever. But do you know what your makeup is of what you would say your regular concert audiences is?
I mean, I guess with the Foden's Diary, it's a slightly different situation, because obviously we've got our local concerts within Sandbach and the surrounding areas, and I guess my local knowledge, I've got a good idea what I'm going to get there. But then when we travel around the country, I mean, like we were at King's Lynn yesterday, for example. I think what I notice, I guess this is a concern for all of us, is that our audiences are aging, for sure. And although yesterday afternoon at King's Lynn, it was a good spread. There were quite, there were a number of younger faces. But I think with Fowles, we tend to present a first half that contains, and this might come up a little bit later. I view programs like a good meal, actually, or like a good taster menu. I think there needs to be a little bit of substance in a regular, for want of a better description, program, and I tend to do a first half that contains that sort of weighty material, and I'll very often finish the first half with a major work, not always necessarily the current test piece. Obviously we've been using the finale of Sand and Stars quite a lot since last September. Very often something, for example, like Variations on Laudate Dominum, that is based on a hymn tune, so there's a clear melody that the audience can hang its hat on, but it's still a piece of proper music. It's substantial repertoire. It doesn't have to be the latest top section, all bells, all whistles with 300 percussion instruments to be a piece of good music. There's plenty of music within every section of repertoire. We was with one of the players a few weeks ago talking about Goff's Cross Batons as being a great piece that'll sit in a program for a top section band really nicely and not offend anybody in the audience, whether they're 7 or 70. And I think that's the key, is presenting high quality music, but not necessarily the latest blockbuster. I think that's important for us to remember. A test piece doesn't have to be incredibly hard for the level of band we're conducting at that concert for it to be quality music and perfectly acceptable to present to that audience. I think I can pretty much gauge a Fowles concert what sort of audience I'm going to get.
Mm-hmm. I think when I've been put in a position where I don't know the audience, I ask myself the questions: what do you think the audience will expect from the band? And also, what would I expect to hear, and what would I like? Because I think, and this goes into entertainment contests as well, people think they've got to pick the right pieces of music because the judges will appreciate it. Well, actually, the judges are part of the audience, and I picture myself sitting in an audience. What would I expect? What do I want to hear? Would I like that? Not everyone's going to like what I like, but you can't please everybody. I think when I got asked to do a concert with Desford, is it down in Stroud, Mike, they used to do regularly?
Yeah, the subscription rooms had a regular series.
Yeah, and I had no idea what the band was going to be like, but I got a general impression. But I also knew that audience was expecting a certain amount of material, entertainment. They wanted something a bit more highbrow as well. They like something meaty, like you say, with Fowles, getting into that. But you've got to sit there a little bit with your own brain and put yourself into the audience and what they're going to expect, what they want to hear, what do they want to be challenged by, what are the sort of things that they want. Not everyone's idea of entertainment is exactly the same. Don't ask Russell ever to do an entertainment contest. He hates it. But it is a matter of what the audience is expecting and what you would also like to give the audience as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mike, I went to Unibrass for the very first time, and Fowles did the concert on the night time. You were there. Now, I have to say, that crowd was the rowdiest crowd I've ever been involved with. On the concert on the night, that was the rowdiest concert. Now, I have to say, I'm not quite sure how to manage that. It wasn't just the repertoire, it was also the way you engaged them, I have to say, Mike. I reckon by the time you finished, they would have listened to anything. But I mean, how did you plan for Unibrass? Have you been there before? Did you know that was the sort of crowd you're going to get?
So I judged Unibrass a number of years ago, actually. So I'd got a idea that by the time we went on to do the gala concert, it was going to be pretty lively.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know. I guess my trick that night, if it's a trick, was that I didn't try in any way to sort of calm them or quieten them. I very much embraced the fact that it was a really bubbly crowd, and played on that and try and involve them. And and if there's suddenly a cheer from one side and then it's responded to by the other, well, frankly, that's part of my job done for me, because let them trade and then say, right, let's have some more music now. Then off we go. This is, and I think if they feel that the whole thing about that event was about inclusivity and involvement, and I think the minute I'll be honest, I hate concerts where I feel as though it's an us and them situation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an old trick, I know, but the first thing I do is say good evening, and if I don't get a response, I'm straight back at them. And it's right now, come on, ladies and gentlemen, I remember this venue being much warmer than this, and we want the evening to be an interactive experience. So, shall we just try that again? And there's really easy tricks to get them on, but things like that, to just break down that barrier of them feeling, if they want a night like that, they can stay at home and watch telly. Because the concerts that do not have interaction between the stage and the audience, that is like them just watching a TV screen. So I like the audience to feel as though they're very much part of the event.
I mean, that was mainly youngsters. They really enjoyed it, didn't they?
Yeah. And I mean, we have the finale of the area piece on that night as part of the prep, the variations on Enigma finale, and that got a great reaction.
Yeah.
And I think the banter thing is so important, but you've also got to know your stage. There are certain actual physical things that make it more difficult. Me at Eccles, I'm on ground floor. I walk up and down the audience and get them, engaged. Christmas concerts, they're all sat down 40 minutes before the concert even starts, cheering and whooping and, getting ready for the afternoon or evening. But I think new conductors or inexperienced conductors know that if you're on ground level, it's really easy to communicate with an audience and get them involved. But sometimes you're on a stage where you're high up looking down at an audience and they're looking up at you. That is a physical barrier. So you've got to work ways how to get rid of that and how to bring them into the sort of, we're all a family here tonight for this evening together. And it's, I remember I did a concert with a band, and it was a seated at tables situation, and we were so high up. I was looking down. It felt like I was a million miles away, and I just kept going on at them because it was like I couldn't get them, and I couldn't get them, but I kept going and going and going. And by the end of it, they'd all turned the chairs around. They weren't sitting in tables anymore, and they were all looking up at us. So it's something you've got to work at to get an audience to really connect with you. Then you can do anything you like.
And I just bring in some. Sorry,
as Alan's put a couple of interesting things in here. Do you want to throw in the mix, Alan?
Sorry, apologies. I'm kind of tight. It's really interesting to sit back and have a listen, actually. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't want to bang my own particular drum on this one, but I think maybe sometimes it's helpful to try and kind of try and recognize our own the own construct that we put upon ourselves. You know what I mean? Because of course, I mean, I've had so many times with bands when I've worked with them that said, well, actually, in our concerts, we always play this, or we always play this kind of music, or we need to do something that's where we're standing up and wandering around because that's what the audience wants. And of course, at the end of the day, it may well be the case that the audience want that because the people that have turned up to the concert have experienced that 100 times before. So they've chosen to come. The interesting question is who isn't coming? Who are the people who are deciding that the concert isn't for them?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think sometimes we go. I mean, I'm just thinking about this recently. I think sometimes the challenge is trying to be, and maybe it's even falling into trap, trying to be all things to all people, and kind of thinking, well, actually, this is, when we do our concert, thinking, well, actually, this is what our audience wants. Therefore, we're going to try and, get a lot of things in there that are going to tick the boxes for everyone. Whereas in actual fact, it's not always necessarily clear whether that's landed with the audience. And actually, the interesting question is, has it broadened the audience? Yeah, I don't. It's a really interesting one. I think my personal view in this, I'll try not to ramble too much, is that I think contesting is wonderful, but I think it's also a massive problem in terms of how we think about programming. The idea about and it's interesting, the idea about putting a test piece in a concert program. I mean, that is an interesting one, isn't it? Because I mean, at the end of the day, we're putting a piece of music in a concert program.
Yeah.
But of course, that piece of music is probably going to form into a formula.
That very thing you're saying goes back to where we were early on about how we present the piece of music.
Yeah.
It's interesting, actually, on socials across the last 10, 12 months or so, there's been some old programmes popping up, some Brighouse programmes, some Gus programmes with Jeffrey Brand. And actually, when you look back at those older programmes, there's very often what we would identify as maybe 2 or 3 test pieces within one evening. But I feel absolutely sure that they weren't presented in that manner. They were just presented as the piece of music that they were. And I think that's really important. And I think one of your other things in there, not wanting to sort of jump on and tread on your toes, is this idea of so many of our concerts, we're looking at them as being revenue generators. So we're trying to attract an audience all the time for that very, very reason. And then are we then, by definition of that, trying to be everything to all people? That we maybe have to take the route of separating and of doing a number of those in order to do a program similar to the one you did recently. But that, I think I said that earlier on, didn't I, about how we advertise and market a program is going to clearly tell an advanced audience, this is the sort of program it is, this is the repertoire. And that may mean that some people who are our regular followers think, well, I'll give that one a miss, but I'm going to go to the one the following month because I know what I'm going to get. But then it might bring out of the woodwork the people, as you say, that are not coming to the regular ones because the serious music is what they want, as was proved by the demand for Bromsgrove and good audience numbers at the RNCM each year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually an interesting example. I mean, the thing that kind of got me thinking about this, the wind band that I conduct, who do like 3 concerts a year, and that's all they do. They're a very good band, but they basically do 3 concerts, and the way that they do their concerts is there's a theme. So they have one central piece that and this is interesting because the program's often chosen for the players. So they'll make a decision in terms of saying, actually, what's something that we really want to play, and then they'll frame, and then that'll be the central point on the program. So when I'm planning a program there, what often happens, there'll be one big piece. And then we'll think, actually, what's the theme then that can build around this piece? And then often the interesting thing is trying to bring in as many musical twists and turns within this overarching theme, and then the concert's marketed to that theme, which is often something quite specific. You then links these things together, and I think it's quite curious. I think thinking of themes in something in quite a specific way is help. It can be helpful in terms of bringing in a variety of music. Because the thing that's driving the program is the thematic intent rather than the maybe what the audience wants or actually even that I'm not talking about a theme of night at the opera or whatever, or
sure.
Or that kind of thing. But I mean, if there's some golden thread that you can bring to a program, I think it can give ways that make it feel cohesive. I think if the program feels cohesive, then it's probably worked as a program. But actually, I think the question about who it's for is interesting. Because I think there is a lot of value in thinking, actually, there's this idea of education. I'm not going to ramble on too much longer, but this idea of education is interesting. So I think there's actually an argument that kind of educating the band and educating the players and the role of the conductor in terms of, and I don't mean educating in terms of throwing music at them necessarily that's unfamiliar, although I think that's quite important. I think educating in terms of broadening the horizons of band members to play music that they haven't done before. Or to encounter things they haven't done, and I think at all levels that's a helpful thing, because then it helps to broaden the musical horizons of the band and helps people to think a bit more widely about music.
Well, I read that very, very subject is actually what I remember as a young brass player in a 4th section band. We had a conductor who had played at championship section level. but it was the exposure to orchestral transcriptions that then I'd go to my local library on the weekend and try and find the original. And it was doing I mean, I very clearly in that band room, I remember the Murder of the Force of Destiny very clearly. It's a 4-section band. But playing music like that and Le Prelude and Eine kleine Nacht, all those old arrangements, but it made me go out and listen to the original. So exactly that you're talking about, of broadening people's horizons. And I think that also is going to link into something we're going to talk about a little later, actually, of things to do. How can we improve a band through repertoire? Things to do when a band's not busy in the diary. So it's really interesting that you bring that to the table. Thanks, Alan. And I think, Mareika, we got as the next section, actually, hadn't we? Who is the audience?
Yeah, definitely. Who we and this goes into we talked briefly on the phone about own choice repertoire for a contest. When you're picking a piece of music as an own choice, you and I both said, how many times have we gone to adjudicate a contest where you know that the conductor has chosen that piece because he or she wants to do it, regardless of the fact that the band can or can't play that piece. And it's about how to dress something up and present it to an audience that is both challenging but not out of the bounds of ridiculous in terms of difficulty. And the audience, I treat judges as part of the audience. They have to be. If they're not going to sit there and enjoy it, enjoy the experience of what I'm presenting, own choice or entertainment contest, you've got to pick what they would like, what the audience is going to like. Be a bit more generic about it. You can't please everybody. That's the other rule that I learned. If you spent your nights twisting away about trying to choose the right piece of music, well, the right piece of music is what you think is going to be right for the occasion, right for the band, what's entertaining. So you can't twist yourself in and out. You've got to have a generic audience member sitting in the middle of that audience and say, what are they going to like?
Can I ask, if you're going to an entertainment contest, so our band is doing this entertainment contest in September, and we never do entertainment contests, and it's a new contest. Where do you start from? You've got a blank sheet of paper and you've got to pick a theme, or where on earth, what are we going to do? How would you start?
I have to say, I mean, I know Mike's done a lot. I have done so many entertainment contests. And usually the inspiration for me personally comes with a piece of music that I think, oh, love to do that in an entertainment contest. And I build something around that. I used to choose music that was, the whole program would be eclectic. Then I went thematic for a while, and then went a little bit eclectic again. I don't see how either eclectic or thematic there wasn't any difference in terms of results for me. They were both equally as successful as each other. But usually it comes from a piece of music. I don't often think of a theme first and then go. But other people do that. They think, I want to do it on space, or I want to do it on whatever, Halloween. Oh my goodness, I've seen enough of them at entertainment contests. But it's for me, it's usually generally 90% of the time a piece of music that I like, and then I build from there.
I'm very, very similar. I've had success with themes. I've had success with non-themed. In fact, one of the most enjoyable programs I was involved in had no theme. I just found pieces that I always check the key progression of the program.
Yeah.
That's important. I think the sort of the musical journey we take the listener on is, for me, important. So things like that come into play for me. But similarly, when I put that program together, it was one of the ones I did at Butlins with Desford, that wasn't themed, and I'd been sitting for hours, and very often a piece will be a trigger, and I used to annoy my wife intently because our lounge would be any envelopes that had come through the post that just sit there that day. We'd be watching something, and then all of a sudden I'd pick up a pen and I'd start writing. She says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I've got a program just come in my head," and one piece is a trigger, and I've got like I don't know how many sheets of A4 with programs on. But I think the most important thing is being cold and ruthless about the way you whittle down the material. And really say, is that piece going to do what I want it to do at that point in the program? Whether you're wanting to lift the audience, whether you're wanting to relax the audience, whether you want to be really reflective before the finale, I think you have to be really cold and hard and say, is that, and even it might be, and it's happened to me before, where the piece that I end up cutting is the first piece that came into my head that's thought, I really want to do that. But then actually, the whole process of evolving that program has resulted in me ignoring the piece that was the trigger, because another piece came to mind that I thought was better.
Yeah, I've had exactly the same experience. One particular occasion, I chose this piece. I was determined to build my program around it. And when I got it, I discovered that it was just so long. And the hours I spent trying to make it work into the 20-odd 2 minutes that I had, I wasted weeks trying to make it fit, to cut it and start again. Because it was never going to work. You can't spend half a concert program doing one piece.
And I'm sure all of us that are on here tonight are the same. I mean, the amount of hours you can spend online in the repertoire rabbit hole of YouTube, and you know, it's like you listen to one thing and then you've got a list of options down the side, and it can be just a complete time sponge. But I mean, spending time doing that, I've found so much music I wasn't aware of. You know, and following tangents.
Was there a question that Rita came up? I can't see the questions, unfortunately. Rita asked a question.
It wasn't a question. It was just a comment that when you were talking about own choice for contesting, my band were entertaining, pardon the pun, going back into the competition field in April of 2025. So what we're trying to do, because it's a set piece on one day, own choice on another day, is that in August, I've sort of pre-selected 4 or 5 potentials of that own choice. And we're just going to sort of have a reading session of them and just see what people feel like, you know, knowing that some of it might be, and following a little bit of Alan's comment after that, is I'm not pushing them so far where they're going to be pushed beyond their boundaries, but I don't wish to have them just sit back and twiddle their thumbs on the chart either. You know, some of the goal setting has to be musical development. But that's what I'm planning to do in order to come up with a good feel. If they're turning around and they're saying, gag me with a spoon on a chart, I mean, I'm not going to force the issue type thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But also too, in my experience, band people make up their minds about what they think of a piece too quickly. They will say, no, don't like that.
Yeah, but if I get the sort of feel, like, then I know I have the potential to work with them and give them, and then they can do it. I mean, but if they're just saying like, no, my arthritis is preventing me from doing that chart, you know, that type of thing, then we're a part-time band, so it's not worth me trying to push the gate on that one.
No, but make sure you get through the piece, work on it a little bit so that they get an accurate, because there are many of band people out there that are not good sight readers. It's going, you know, sometimes it's an absolute disaster. There are some really good bands that can't sight read. It's nothing to do with what grade they're in. But yeah, it's just that don't let them make up their minds too quickly. At the end of the day, you know what that group, you know the group in front of you.
Yeah.
Take a chance, push a little bit, and see how you go.
Thank you.
I think you've made some really interesting points, actually, Rita, because there's been times when I've judged own choice contests, and when we're asked to give a few sort of thoughts on the day on stage, the on-stage comments, I've found myself very often saying a similar thing. Of a lot of it comes down to why. I mean, I guess with what you're talking about, a two-piece discipline contest where you've got to do you're doing a set test and an own choice, so you're directed that way. If it's an own choice that, so in that situation, you're looking to maximise your band's strengths and not show off any weaknesses. But I like the fact that you also said you want it to be also something that's going to improve the band as well, which is an important part of what we're doing. And I think this whole evening, I think that's something we can remember with concert repertoire as well. We can improve our bands through repertoire and actually make contesting a little easier by raising the standard on a day-to-day basis. Suddenly this idea that the contest drives the standard, actually, it should be a quest for standard improvement all year round. And our concert repertoire can very much do that. But with own choice, where it's one piece and you've chosen to attend the contest, I've said many times, you know, I'm very well aware that there'll be bands who've played for me today who may have different reasons for being here. There's the bands who've come here to, without any shadow of a doubt, try and win. But there may be also bands here who are just looking to do this to improve the band and enjoy playing the piece they've chosen, even if today proved to be just a fraction of a step too far. But don't be surprised if that's reflected in the results. And I think, I know for a fact some bands do an own choice because they want to play that piece, but they also want the opportunity to play it in the sporting situation in front of an audience and get feedback from an adjudicator, a completely fresh set of ears that may have not heard the band before and just looking for a reaction to what their band sounds like, and maybe some tips for improvement and things to look at. Not every band attends a contest, and I know this is a radical thought for those of us that are built in a very sporting manner, but not every band attends a contest to always try and win it. There's many reasons for attending, and I'm seeing a couple of head nods here, which is great, because I do believe that there's different reasons for attending a contest.
Is there a danger if you give the band too much input? In my experience, I've never conducted an entertainment contest, but in terms of concerts, bands want to play what they like playing, and quite often you got to go, you got to say, but the audience. We need to think about the audience. I've had pieces where the band hate playing them, and yet you get in the audience, they absolutely love it, but the band didn't really want to do it.
I think it's a case of try to sort of take both points of view, isn't it? I think certainly I've done, and just carrying on with the own choice contest for a moment. With a band, very often had a 5-minute open forum at the end of rehearsal and said, right, we've got that own choice coming up. Any ideas from the floor, pieces you'd like as a band you'd like to play? And I draw a list up and I say, right, leave that with me. I'm going to whittle that down to 5. And then I'll come back to you. And I have done a band vote. If I've known that all 5 pieces were suitable for the band, I've come back a couple of weeks later and said, right, these are the 5. Let's rank them 1 to 5. Who's voting for this? And we've all accepted that whichever piece comes out, that's the one we're going to do. Provided, but I've vetted the list to know that each piece suits the band and will do the job we want it to do. Equally, I've walked in, if I've known there was a piece, I've walked in to a band and said, right, that's what we're doing. So I've done it both ways. And I think you can create a feeling of involvement in the decision. You don't have to do it every time.
No.
I've sort of.
Wouldn't you also say the way that you sell a piece to an audience, you can do that to the band as well?
Absolutely.
I think, you know, early days, I mean, I've been at Eccles for 15 years, and earlier stages, I'd take risks, and they'd question me about it. And I say, well, this is why I'm here. This is, you put your trust in me, trust me. And then it pays off. And then you can push the boundaries after that. I've put some absolutely hilarious things on entertainment contests where the band looks at me like I've had some sort of a seizure, and they sit there and go, that's never going to work. So it is going to work, and it does. And I think that I always get the feedback from the band. They're constantly sending me, you know, can we try this? Can we try that? Can we try this? Unfortunately, I've got a Star Trek and Star Wars mad person as well that is, you know, just wants sci-fi stuff on every single concert program. But there is a certain amount of trust, and you've got to be, you know, a conductor is a seller of thoughts and a seller of ideas. You are the one that has to provide the inspiration, as well as the point of trying to push the band without them feeling pushed, but they're gaining all this knowledge about pieces of music that, you know, it teaches me as well. I do a research, and I find things, because I haven't grown up in this country, pieces that existed so many years ago are still got value and worth. You don't always have to go absolutely on the set new groundbreaking pieces. You can go back and find some absolute pearlers that haven't been played for a while, that the audience will sit there and they go, oh, I remember hearing that on the radio.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, I guess, if the band know the audience appreciates it, even if they didn't like it at the beginning, they normally like it afterwards.
Yeah. I think just trying to get people to keep it, and this tags into what Mareika was saying about getting a band, trying to persuade them not to judge something until they can play it. Exactly what you've just been talking about. Trying to foster an environment whereby your band will experiment with repertoire, not judge it too soon, and take a chance on a concert, because the reaction may just surprise you. I remember I worked with a band who were very fortunate enough to have a sponsorship from a major national sort of body, and we had a concert every year in the Albert Hall at Christmas. There was a Raymond Gubby Scratch London Orchestra. There were always soloists. The band had sort of spots in each half because we were sponsored by, it was BT. And I remember the first year I had to do the Christmas concert, and I put together, there were little, little lollipops that I knew, but I was also quite adamant that I wanted to show that a band could play more than just little 2-minute pot boilers to 5,500 people at Christmas, like some sort of Christmas decoration. So I programmed "Shine as the Light," Peter Graham, which in no way groundbreaking at all, sort of 6.5, 7 minutes. But I thought to myself, well, if we're going to be on stage with a London Scratch Orchestra session players, that orchestra is going to be no mugs. And I just wanted to show that a band could be on the same stage as an orchestra and play a piece of proper music, not just, have 5,500 people saying, oh, that was nice, the band was good, oh, I like, that little 2-minute ditty. And it was really interesting, because about a week before the concert, I had a phone call from a concerned band member who just said, are you sure about what you're doing? I've done this concert with the band for a number of times. I said, and I think this is an important one for all of us as conductors, actually, as well as program planners, is I listened. I let him say what he'd got to say. I didn't try and, sort of put an alternative and sort of shoot the idea down straight away. I just listened to everything he got to say, and I just said, well, I take all your points. I understand your concerns, but I'm just going to ask you to trust me, similar to what Mareika said. And he just says, well, thanks for listening, and let's hope it all turns out well. And similar situation at the centre of the earth. Of all the pieces the band played, "Shine as the Light" got the biggest reaction out of that Albert Hall audience that night, and the amount of players that came up, I could hear them in the changing room after saying, well, I've got to eat my words now, haven't I? You know?
Yeah.
But you've got to foster that environment. Sometimes you've got to take a risk. If the strength of your conviction is true, you take a risk and it then helps you to foster that environment of, well, let's try it, and let's give an audience credit for maybe being able to accept something a little more than what they think they can.
Yeah.
Is one of the dangers, though, that, and you've highlighted there, is that we underestimate the musical intelligence of the audiences that we play to. A little bit earlier, you said, we try to be, something to everyone. But in doing that, I think we underestimate the intelligence of a musical audience to accept more than just being fed musical sugar all the time. And that's one of the things that we tend to, it should be a warning sign for all bands. Just to think something maybe popular with an audience doesn't mean to say that you're actually giving them good quality music that they can actually go away and appreciate. It's like a music, it's the little immediate sugar rush that they get. And everybody thinks, oh, that's fantastic. What great applause we've had for that there. Afterwards, they forget all about it. It's the point that Mike made then. The thing that lasts in the memory to them is something which is possibly more substantial to them, which has got a little bit of musical intellect behind it, which has been explained to them. And that's the thing that they take away from the concert. The other part is that I think we're in danger. We've become almost inverted musical snobs. We turn around and say, the outside world doesn't understand brass band music and what we do. Well, I'm afraid to say they understand exactly what we do, especially at different levels. People want and expect high quality entertainment of a brass band or high quality music making. And again, as Mike said, and Mareika has said as well, if you're appearing on stage with a professional singer, you don't expect that singer to turn around and start singing lollipops all night to you. There's an expectation that you're going to get something which may possibly challenge you, maybe something that will question your own musical understanding of a form or a genre, whatever. We're in the danger of just saying, no, what we'll actually give them is a thing that will get the immediate applause, give them the sugar. And one of the problems with that, and it's secondary base to it, is that when we go contesting with our entertainment hats on, we do exactly the same thing time and time and time again. And we try to say, be something to everybody and everything, try and tick all the boxes that we need to tick for the entertainment genre. And what we come up with is something which is just spread way, way too thin. People may applaud at the end of it, but it's not because of the quality of what they do. It's just because they've had a sugar rush, which has been pushed down their throat. So we have to be very careful, I think, with doing it. And then the final point, sorry about this, when you then go and really do focus on quality and give them that, the appreciation that you get is longer term. It's not the immediate thing. They may not come back to the very next concert if you put it on Proms in the Park or whatever it is, something like that. But if you're putting on something which is going to give them more serious music, you will find that that audience will return to you. But I think we're in danger of just going for the immediacy of the immediacy of the applause and the immediacy of possibly a contest result, and thinking that popularity is success, and it isn't.
I think the word that you and I think you could say it's about substance, isn't it? That rounds everything up. My audience has come back because I've done everything. I don't wrap things up. I present them new. I remember when Penn Lee was the band was still in the third section. We'd already done the contest. And I said, what a waste to put this wonderful piece of music back in the library. I said, we're putting it on a concert. And we put it on a Proms concert. We did a video slide presentation. And I have audience members, and that was, 10, 11, 12, maybe 12 years ago. I've got audience members coming up to me saying, I remember when you put that on the concert program. So people I think also too, you've got to also, there is something about who is the audience. Park concert in a rotunda, there is going to be an expectation of toe tappers and all that sort of stuff, but you can still introduce weather permitted. I remember doing concert, it was so windy, no one could hear anything. It was just blown away. But you can put stuff on, but there is an expectation of the audience at the RNCM and at a concert that is a regular concert. But you still have to look and vary the repertoire, and it's about substance rather than fireworks and rainbows and unicorns.
It's really interesting, Ewan, that you use the term sugar. I've got that written down on my piece of paper here. And when I talk about a program being like a meal, there needs to be substance. If every course is sugar, as you say, you get the sugar rush, but the come down is instant and the impact is nowhere near as long lasting. Yeah.
And also too, from a band's point of view, if you're just constantly putting on the same stuff all the time, the band will get bored. They will switch off, and then they won't play well.
And it will also, if you do that with a band, it will also then, and I believe this actually with youngsters and YouTube and this short attention span of the instant hit or these little TikTok vids and whatnot, that it promotes a short attention span. So actually, if it's constant sugar in a 2-minute lump, then when your band does actually have to do an 11-minute piece of substance, they're going to find that very, very difficult to then do and approach. I think that brings me in a way to what I was saying about what do we do with our bands when our diary isn't busy. That's the golden opportunity to introduce repertoire, to as Alan was saying earlier on, just take them slightly outside the comfort zone, introduce them to something they've not seen before, that's of substance. I think that the message with all of this really is quality music, the quality of the writing, the quality of the structure, and that's, as you said, there's some substance. The quiet diary times can be really dangerous because when we've got a band on an incremental improvement, the incremental improvement slope can be really quite gradual. The loss of those improvements, the slope downwards, can be much steeper and faster. And I think when a band is quiet, that's when we have to, through repertoire, maybe think without, and this can be without the band even realising it, be thinking, right, what are the chinks in this band's armour? What are the things I need to improve? And then look at what repertoire can do that's quality music that will engage them in rehearsals when they're sitting there thinking, well, we haven't got a job for 3 months. You know, I could be out walking the dog. Finding the way through quality repertoire to engage your musicians when the diary isn't driving everything. Those quiet times can be great for improving the band, but we have to find a way, let's face it, in this day and age, of keeping our band there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you've got to, I try to introduce pieces at the end of the season in a way so that they feel that it will be used at some point, because if it's a goal to nothing, then they switch off and go, well, we're never going to play that. I think it's important that those pieces are valued, and that this is an option for this concert or this contest or whatever. Regardless, this piece of music is going to be worth something. And I usually also take all throughout the whole of the season the suggestions of the band members that they've given me, saying, can we play this? And I say, no. Can we play this? No. I will often get those pieces out and say, okay, let's go. We'll do this as well for the next fortnight, 3 weeks, where we've got nothing to do before the break. I get everything out that's been suggested, as well as new stuff.
So Alan's had his hand up for a while. Did you have something to ask?
Oh yeah, sorry. So yeah, I some really interesting points that are coming up. Actually, it got me thinking. Thank you. Yeah, it's quite an interesting one actually, because I think I don't know. I mean, I'm starting to think that a lot of the discussion seems to be considering, what the purpose of the repertoire is. What you know, if the purpose of the music that's chosen is to improve the band, which is a worthy purpose, right? You know, to improve the quality of the band at contesting, you know, then the repertoire that you would choose would not be the same than if the purpose of the repertoire was to keep a, you know, to give an audience sugar, or the purpose of the repertoire was to push a couple of boundaries and things. You know what I mean? It's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because actually, I guess the bigger picture that sits beyond all of this is what's the purpose of the performances that the band does? You know, who are they for and what are they for? And then that of course then drives repertoire decisions. I think in any, you know, in any sphere or through any lens, you can make this adjustments of quality. But actually, quality is subjective. Sorry, I'm going to play devil's advocate a bit here, because I think whose quality is it? Because, you know, a piece that I would think is a good quality piece of music is not the same as a piece of music someone else would think is a good quality piece of music. And at the end of the day, conductors going into band rooms are bringing their own lived experiences and their own perceptions of music. And at the end of the day, music is, and in my view, should always never be subject to the to ranking of which music is better. You know, at the end of the day, fundamentally, musical cultures across a whole you know, gamut of context. You know, the minute we start to define which music is superior and inferior, the minute it ceases to be music. You know, the minute we're in a culture war. Sorry, I know I'm getting very hung up on this. I'm sorry, but I think actually, you know, of course, you can say actually, if what we're saying is that we want to be progressive with new music, you know, then you can start, I guess, to consider what quality new music is. But actually, at the end of the day, I think there's always an element of taking risks, aren't there? You know, I think doing something new, there's a value in doing something new, whether it works or whether it doesn't. And I think doing something, you know, actually a big thing, to be honest, I'll be really honest, one big thing with repertoire choices now with me, with bands and wind bands and all the rest of it, is actually trying to encourage more diversity in programming from other. I hope that by considering a bit more diversity in the music that's programmed, it might bring music to the forefront to encourage other bands to do the same. And you know, so every concert program I do, I'm always, you know, and it's tricky, isn't it? It's a tricky balance, because you're considering that this question of quality is an awkward one when you consider diversity in programming. Because if we were going to program the repertoire that we thought was the best scored and the highest quality, that you know, whatever we think that means individually could be representative of what we think good band music is. But good band music, in terms of the contesting lens, is maybe not necessarily objectively good. It's just what we've got our own things that we come with as well that we consider quality to be. So sorry, I'm kind of rambling a bit here, but I think actually there's a big part of considering the purpose of repertoire choices to encourage voices which we haven't yet heard, or voices which other people haven't encountered, to bring them to a wider audience. Because at the end of the day, you know, educating the audience in terms of saying, you know, that this music is better and so you should like it, is, you know, neither here nor there. But I think actually saying to an audience, here's something you've never heard, you know, pointing the audience to the world and saying, look over here, here's something that you don't know. Now here's something else that you don't know, and pointing the players to the world is, I think, a powerful thing. You know, so I think whether it's something that might not be the best quality piece objectively, but actually I think the value in doing it is to set a bit of a tone. I think that it's something which is of value to do, you know, rather than necessarily, you know. So I'm rambling a bit about this, but I think it's we've got to be a little bit careful, I think, sometimes when considering what we think is good quality music, because that's not everyone's going to agree on what that is. You know, yeah.
And I think with that you're talking a lot about education to bring the different sources, composers into the mix, but also too, I think your point about everyone's opinion is different. I think you've got to pick, if you find a piece of music no one's ever heard before, you've got to make the decision of whether it is going to be well accepted and whether it's appropriate for that venue. RNCM's different to Warrington Council Townhouse. You know, there are different scenarios where you can present that material. I agree with you. I think we can get closed off and not look for new music. I think Michael's probably the same. I mean, even Ewan probably does his own internet searching. I can spend hours looking for new stuff, hours and hours and hours and hours. And it is important.
You don't want to see my internet search engine, Mareika. I can tell you. I promise. I promise. Can I ask Alan, go back and return to that then? You say about, do you think it's important for bands then to try and program music which is reflective of the diversity of the audience, that you have and that you want to attract?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's an issue in terms of actually, I mean, representation. I mean, this is bigger than programming, isn't it? Because representation is not just about the, you know, whose music we're playing. The audience may not necessarily know what the social cultural or ethnic background of the composer may be. You know, I mean, but actually more importantly than that, I think the more the audience can see themselves reflected in the performers and the music that's being played, the less it feels like an alien thing or something that's not for them. I mean, I'll give you an interesting example. So this is a bit left field, but I had a brass band of kids that I was teaching in my old school, and the brass band became, just because of the diversity of the ethnic diversity and cultural diversity within the school, we had 70% of the students in the band were second, third generation Black African students, and the remainder were mainly, you know, from families that originated from Latin America. There was one student who was English, if you know, Caucasian English, if you like. And I took the local band, the Enfield band, who were just 5 minutes around the corner into the school, and we did a concert program, which was tunes that we thought the kids would know. So we did things like Skyfall and various things that we could find. The only music that we could find that was in the band's library that was written post 1985, and kind of brought it into the concert. But it was interesting because even though the music, we thought it might have resonated a little bit, not one child went from that youth band into the youth band for the Enfield band. And when I spoke to the kids about it later, they said, well, you know, the music's a bit, you know, it doesn't sound as good as it would do if it were in guitars, you know what I mean? And then they also said, but you know, the band are all old. They're all old, they're all white, you know, kind of thing. You know, love it or loathe it, if you can't see yourself reflected in the people who represent the musical tradition or in the music itself, then that's I think one of the reasons why we struggle with diversity in banding, full stop. And I think this is not just a brass banding issue. This is, you know, this orchestra have the same questions, you know, how to remain relevant, and the same discussions about programming. So this is not necessarily quite as much of an echo chamber for banding as I think we think it is. But actually, I think my personal view is it's about meeting in the middle. It's about going visiting. So it's about trying to create something. When something new is created, it gives the potential for a new meaning to be made with both parties, right? So I think if you create something which doesn't already exist, if it's done in a way, you know, I think that partnerships with other groups are quite interesting as a way of creating new music, because then we're not considering high art contemporary music potentially, but then if you go to another musical context and create something with them, then it can bring them in and bring you to them as well. So it helps us think beyond the boundaries, you know. Sorry.
Could I ask the question then further on to you, the conductors there then, how many of you then do a post-concert feedback, or put something in place where you can find off your audience which you've just performed to, whether or not they've enjoyed it, which is a bit of a placebo question really, in effect, otherwise they wouldn't reply to you. But secondly, to find out what their experience is of the concert and whether or not they have suggestions of whether or not, you know, I was hoping to hear this, or, you know, something like that. So do you employ that technique as well to find something directly from the audiences that you were currently playing to shape what you possibly may do in the future?
Interestingly, well, I've only just talked about this with Eccles, that at the end of a concert, I have 45 minutes of people coming up to me to say, really loved it. Have you ever thought about this piece? Have you ever thought about that? That goes into the memory palace, and I remember that. But I said to the band, after the last big concert, I said, I think we need to have some sheets, some feedback sheets. What would you like? Because one, it'll save me a lot of time and I can get home earlier. But it would be interesting to actually find that out. But I usually have verbal feedback at the end of my concerts.
And yeah, we have. I mean, certainly at Fowles we have done feedback, audience feedback post concert. We have made that facility available 2 or 3 years now. That's been in place. And I think for all of us, it is, the more information we can get from our consumer, the better. You know. And I think Alan's point is absolutely true. It isn't just about our little bubble that we all think is really big, but in reality we all know is really small. Our little bubble of banding it is across the arts, full stop, of you know, audience engagement, and how do we stay relevant, and how do we keep engaging an audience, and indeed a new audience, and an audience for generations to come. Because I think it's a phrase we use at Fowles an awful lot. We very much feel that we're the current custodians of that name, and we're desperately trying to uphold and hopefully enhance the history and heritage of that name. But I think for all of us as stakeholders in banding as a whole, we're all involved in this. I think we all have a responsibility of what are we handing over to the next generation, and I think a lot of the points that Ewan makes are spot on. We have to remain relevant in order to hand ourselves over in a good state, because if what we hand to the next generation is already in terminal decline, then we haven't fulfilled our responsibilities, really, have we?
Well, your point at the very beginning, Michael, to say that, you know, our audiences are getting older. We need to be looking at new repertoire or something that is going to provoke the younger generations to get involved in playing as well as listening, because we all know that the situation of players is, you know, how do we attract players to come and join and want to play a brass instrument if we sit there and play the clog dance at every concert? Not that there's anything wrong with clog dance, of course, but, you know.
Is there anyone who hasn't asked any questions who wants to just make a comment or join in a bit? Matt, you're very quiet. It's not like you. I'm not putting any pressure on, but
I basically everything everybody said on that I think is really, really relevant. One of the things that, in fact, I want to go back about an hour, to be fair. I wrote down Russell and entertainment. I watched Russell do the Regent Hall Robin Hood programme last year, and he was the epitome of entertaining. So that's his narration through that was brilliant. But I think it goes back to, you know, he's spot on.
But that wasn't his programme. It wasn't his programme.
Well, he hosted it very well.
I've got to jump. I think you've been. I mean, we did it yesterday afternoon. Actually, I've done Robin Hood thousands of times, but that was dropped on Russell.
Yes,
he'd not done Robin Hood before.
Well, his pantomime with the audience was brilliant. But I'm going back to, I've just done a weekend a couple of weeks ago with a band that has a very particular USP of brassed off, and a lot of what Michael was saying earlier about is how do you package it as a bit fresher as well. So I think it's, you know, giving the audience that sugar rush is brilliant, but it's also, can you give them a sugar rush in a slightly different way? So when I got told we have to put the brassed off music in and we have to do this and we have to, but the rest of the program is yours. So I delved right back into their repertoire and went, okay, what's big to do with Grimethorpe? So we did Firebird at the end of the first half. That was basically, it happened to be Stravinsky's birthday as well, which I only realised on the day. So it felt like I'd really thought about this and I kind of hadn't. But giving the audience the story, the thing that they're telling about, what is the story of the music, what you're listening for, what you're doing, you can, as Ewan said before, I think you can almost then kind of play anything to them once you've given them the tools to pick it up and go with it.
I think
and then we started
the right
the second half with the brass stuff from Goethe that was an on stage, and the band, it's drawing everything together now. John said before, the band looked at me when I said, we're going to do this, Goethe, and it's going to go like this. You know, you're going to start off stage and you're going to this, and 28 of like Yorkshire's finest looked at me and went, no, we're not. And I kind of said, we will. And they didn't buy into it until the audience went, oh, that really works, that. And that kind of, once you win that battle, then they're more willing to do anything, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, just loads of really good points on that, I thought.
Yeah, I think balance has still got to be, you know, we've got to look for relevance in this world. We're still got to, it's about wrapping it up. I think that's, if you could sum up the whole discussion, is about how do you present this music to the audience. It's all about the conductor. Choose whatever you like. It doesn't matter whose opinion is what, whether you think it's good, whether someone else thinks it's bad, it doesn't matter. It's about how you present that to the audience. if you can sell it. They have to be able to buy it. You can't go, I'm using a very generic term, so please forgive me, but you can't go squeaky gate without explanation. You just can't. You can't just sit there and go, this is the next piece we're going to play. You have to wrap it up so that they are interested. They have got something to relate to, which goes back to Alan as well. People need to be able to relate to music.
But what you've just said, Mareika, doesn't that we can draw it together even more completely than that? Doesn't this come down to every aspect of our job being about the presentation of ideas?
Yeah, it's communication.
Communication, how we deal with people. I mean, the amount of times I've said music's when people say, what do you do and what's hard about your job? I always say, well, music's the easy bit. It's the people that's difficult. And I don't mean the people I'm working with. I mean the people skills that I need. So if we're in a rehearsal situation and at whatever different level of band we're working with, the presentation of ideas is going to be slightly different for whatever level we're working with. Yeah, the concepts are the same, but the way we put them across might differ. Then how we present to an audience, presentation of ideas, how we interact with the press, presentation of ideas. Now, I think, I mean, and I'm not blowing air tonight, but doing an interview with Ewan's easy because he's so good at it. That the way he asks the questions puts you at your ease. So that doesn't feel like an unusual situation. But the way we then present ourselves when we're in that situation with Ewan, we have to, if we apply presentation of ideas to everything we do, it's not something we have to think about and it becomes second nature, then I think that might simplify every part of our job if it's just our natural game.
Definitely.
Very good. I think we've sort of done a bit of summing up there. We've come to a natural conclusion, and we're due to finish at 8:30. I have got just a few adverts to put past you. So before I do that, just like to thank Mareika and Michael for really stimulating conversation and interesting ideas. And thanks also to those who've put questions in the chat and joined in the conversation, which has really sparked off lots of ideas and made it really work. So thanks very much. So I'm just going to share my screen for a few minutes and we're just going to go to the adverts. Can you see that? For those of you who are members, you might want to know that we have a mentoring scheme. This is free. You can get in touch and we will put you in touch with a member of the exec or a regional rep who will chat with you to see what it is you're looking for. It could be, got someone just joining. Could be that you need help with your programming, with your repertoire choice, help with conducting. You might want to go along to somebody else's rehearsals. You might want to have a go at conducting a different band. It's very bespoke sort of arrangement between you and the person that you put in touch with. So that's free to all BBCA members. I don't know if we've got any non-members on the call, but you can join online and it's £50 and it includes individual membership of Brass Bands England. Just moving on. Just want to tell you about the Conductor Awards. So the BBCA sponsors a Conductor Award. This started last year. It's presented at the Brass Band Conference, which this year is in London at the China Exchange on the 19th of October. So from the nominations, we've got 6 people who've been shortlisted and they'll find out on the night. So if you're interested in coming along, it would be good to see you there and we're excited about who's going to win this competition. This session tonight was one of our virtual networking sessions that we have roughly quarterly. We have all sorts of topics. Previous ones we've had about managing band personnel, developing sound collaborations, and we have these evening with, we've had Jim Shepherd and we've had Derek Broadbent. And so the next session we're going to have in the autumn is going to be an evening with some well-known person yet to be confirmed. We've got some ideas, but I haven't had the confirmation yet, so you have to hang on for that. Just to tell you, the next thing that's coming up is the BBCA AGM on the 27th of July, Saturday morning, 10 o'clock on Zoom, to which all members are invited. We're trying to have regional reps for all the areas up and down the country. So we do have some vacancies. If you want to put yourself forward, or you know somebody, or you know someone who's not a member who could be persuaded to join, we're looking for the Southwest. We have had someone who was rep for the whole of the North, but we could break that down into Northwest or Yorkshire, Northeast, to make it more manageable. Looking for the Midlands and Wales. It's not an onerous task, but it would be good to have someone representing us in each area. And finally, just we hope you keep in touch. These are all the ways you can communicate with us. Thanks for joining tonight. I hope you'll join some of these sessions again. Thanks everyone. As my conductor would say, at 10 o'clock at night, the rest of the night's your own. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rosie. Cheers all.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Bye everyone.